Hello, friends. Welcome to another live stream edition of Coming In for a Landing. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Hudrick, and we are going to react to the post-trade deadline stuff. I apologize, I'm a minute late here getting on. I just saw something swirl that the Sixers may have just signed Mason Jones, who was, I believe, waived by the Rockets not that long ago. Obviously, a guy that Daryl Morey brought in, high-level scorer at Arkansas, still a fairly young guy. Curious, especially, I definitely want to get into the buyout stuff and all that. Daryl Morey seemed to indicate when he talked to the press last night that it was more than likely going to be a big that he was going to add. He did say, though, that he is more about adding the best player as opposed to the best fit. So maybe he kind of had a change of heart there, or maybe he was kind of throwing us through a loop. Who knows? With this guy. Daryl Morey is a sharp fella, and he's going to do a lot of things to try to make this team better. And speaking of, the Sixers do make one move yesterday, not the move that perhaps everyone wanted, but they do make a move to get George Hill from the Oklahoma City Thunder, give up a bevy of second-round picks. Tony Bradley is part of that, as well as Terrence Ferguson and Vincent Poirier. Moving to the Knicks as a part of that deal, just to get off the money there, sending the Knicks a couple second-round picks, basically just to absorb that contract. I personally love the George Hill move. I love George Hill as a basketball player. When you talk about kind of glue guys and guys that just do a little bit of everything and play the game the right way and just add those little veteran little nuances, I think he's right up there in that category. He shoots the ball at an extremely high level. He's very efficient, takes care of the basketball. So I think those are all very positive things that George Hill will bring to the table, that he'll bring to the Sixers. I think the one thing that that Daryl Morey talked about a lot last night, and that I happen to really thoroughly agree with, is the idea of optionality. And I just wrote about this for 97.3 ESPN.com. You can check out the story now. The optionality for Doc Rivers now, meaning, it lengthens the team, gives them more depth, gives Doc Rivers more options. So George Hill is a guy who can shoot, who can dribble, who can pass, and who can play defense. And when you have a guy who can do all of those things, that proves to be very valuable, especially if you have other players who maybe don't have all of those skills, but are elite at other things, but maybe don't have all of the skills that Hill has. To have a guy like that to potentially close games is pretty big, especially a guy who is playoff tested the way George Hill is. Played in a lot of playoff games and played pretty well in a lot of playoff games. Especially to me, I keep harking back to that playoff run 2 years ago he had with Milwaukee, where he was really good, shot the ball extremely well, took care of the ball. And I think that's, when you talk about playing with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, you have to be able to shoot. And because, listen, they're both very talented players, but they are turnover prone. So when you can shoot the basketball at a high level, and you can also play defense at a high level, and you don't turn the ball over, I think that's huge. I think that's going to be a big thing for the Sixers moving forward. I think it's going to allow him to play big minutes with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid at certain times. I do think that's something that's going to happen. And it's also going to allow Shake Milton to play more off the ball, maybe look for him to be, play a more attacking style, and maybe not focus on kind of getting everybody involved, as opposed to, now George Hill can do that. That'll be George Hill's job, and he can kind of get them better in their sets, run the offensive a little better once he's caught up in it. I am curious about the thumb procedure he had. I guess we're going to learn more about that. Daryl Morey didn't have a ton on that. When I asked him about it last night, he basically just said he didn't want to give a timetable, but he seemed to indicate he's not overly concerned, seemed to think that they'll get him back here in the not too distant future. So, so positive things there. And George Hill's going to bring a lot. I want to address the disappointment that the Sixers aren't going to get Kyle Lowry. I get it. It's disappointing. I think we were all kind of, eagerly anticipating, all following along, holding our breath for updates as the day went along. But if any of you looked at Masai Ujiri's comments yesterday after the deadline about why he didn't do it, and basically he kind of admitted that he overvalued him, and that's his prerogative. That's his guy. He's allowed to overvalue him, as I'm sure some people may feel Daryl Morey might overvalue a Tyrese Maxey or a Matisse Thybulle. That's how these things work when it's your guy. And it's a guy, especially again in Kyle Lowry's instance, that won you a championship. That's been such a big part of what you've done. Yeah, you're going to overvalue a guy like that. I totally get it from their perspective, but I think the biggest thing for me is when I look at it, they held on to Kyle Lowry. This isn't a James Harden situation where perhaps they were outbid. No one outbid the Sixers, and if anything, it seemed to me that the Sixers kind of had the most competitive offer, and kind of seemed like they were the closest to maybe making a deal, but a deal ultimately wasn't made. The Heat thought it was too much. The Lakers thought it was too much. So, you can't blame Daryl Morey and say like, oh, he needed to pull the trigger. You have to have a walking away point, and clearly that was met. And I love that Daryl Morey, he improved this team without hurting its future, and I think that's huge. I think, again, optionality, and that's what I went into about the post. I think Daryl said the word optionality like 5 times. He gave Doc Rivers optionality now, more versatility in his lineups, and more players that he can play in a playoff series and match up with in a playoff series. And then he also provided himself more optionality this offseason because you still have, other than that 2025 first-round pick, which has some protections on it, they had their first-round picks for the foreseeable future. So they can use those in a trade this offseason because things move quickly. And not only the picks, but also the players. I mean, you still have Tyrese Maxey, who is very young and very cheap. Matisse Thybulle, same. Isaiah Joe, same. Paul Reed, same. Even Shake Milton, same. These guys are all young, and they're all talented, and they all don't cost you a lot of money. And the Sixers need that. They're a tax team. You have to have guys like that. And then the other thing is, when you look at the future, there's a chance all those guys are going to have a chance to crack the rotation next year. It's not crazy to say that. I mean, already Shake Milton and Matisse Thybulle, I think if his shot improves like this much, I think he's a starter next year. I think he can be that good, and he's going to be an all-defensive team type player. I think that's perfectly reasonable to say that. I still think Shake Milton can develop into your 6-man role. The shot has been a really big disappointment, I have to admit, because Shake has been an excellent shooter at every level he's ever played at. So I'm a little disappointed that Shake, the shot hasn't been there. He's created at a very high level. I do want to say, Jeff, I do see your question, man. I appreciate you hopping on, and I am going to answer it 100%, I promise. But yeah, when you talk about this summer and what could happen, things happen so fast. Like Bradley Beal, right now he wants to stay in Washington. That's what he wants to do. He wants to try to build there. He wants to kind of have that be his legacy of him staying with one team, retiring there. But another half a season of what he's encountering with the Wizards, and maybe his mind changes, maybe the Wizards come to him and they say, hey man, like, we love you and we love what you're doing here, but we think our best move is to trade you and try to, blow this thing up. And if that happens, of all the contenders, of all the teams that could trade for Bradley Beal, guess who has the most assets? The Sixers. Maybe a team like New Orleans could swoop in, but as far as the timeline goes, Bradley Beal would fit the Sixers timeline best. And so I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if it does, and it's not impossible, you're in pretty good shape. You have all these young guys. You have all these draft picks. You have ways to get it done. So that's no small thing. And it's not just Beal or just another player that could be attractive. Maybe maybe in the offseason, maybe the Raptors do decide they don't want to re-sign Kyle Lowry. Maybe you get him in a sign and trade because it'll be a little easier to use his salary there. So, none of this, it's to have that versatility going into the offseason is not a small thing. Look, this team is in first in the Eastern Conference. Even Daryl Morey admitted, if you look at it, the Nets, they're probably the favorites to come out of the East. That's fair. There's no other team in the East that I think this Sixers team, as it is constructed, that they can't beat. I think they can beat every other team. I don't think they get smoked by the Nets. I think they give the Nets a tough series. And I don't think it's impossible that they beat the Nets. If I'm a betting man, which I am not, I would be putting my money on the Nets, but that doesn't mean the Sixers can't beat them or that there's no chance. So I kind of like the idea of, all right, let's give these guys a shot. Let's give Joel Embiid a chance to prove that he can be an MVP and do that into the playoffs. Let's let Tobias Harris prove that he can, the playoffs last year are not who he is, and this version, he can carry this into the playoffs and provide that complementary scoring and be kind of that fourth quarter guy. And then Ben Simmons, let's let Ben Simmons play this out. Let's see what he can do. And I think it's not the worst approach. It's not like you're saying you still improved the team and you still added to it. So it's not like, you just didn't make a splashy move, which maybe the splashy move would have cost you too much in hindsight. And I like the idea of having more bites at the apple. So you're not just going all in for the season. You're going, you're going to be competitive for the season. You're going to be a contender, but now you're also going to be in a great position next offseason to come back at it again, and perhaps even the offseason after that. You just set yourself up very well. So, again, just to address the disappointment, that's where I wanted to go. But now you guys are flooding me with questions, and I love it. So let's get to some of those. So, Jeff Stewart, thanks so much, man. I appreciate you. You've been very active talking to me on Twitter, and I really appreciate the back and forth, man. What do you think the playoff rotation looks like as of now, and do you think the Sixers will get any help on the buyout market? So I will say the rotation-wise, playoff-wise, you're only going to be playing 8 or 9, you would imagine. So I would say Korkmaz is probably out in the playoff rotation. Korkmaz might be out. I mean, frankly, he might be out of the rotation now. George Hill is probably going to play point guard. Shake Milton probably moves off the ball. Then you have Matisse Thybulle. You probably have Mike Scott playing that 4 for now, and maybe Paul Reed might challenge him because Paul Reed looked pretty damn good last night. And then Dwight Howard's your 5, barring a mobile 5 that really gives him a lot of problems. But Doc seems to even like kind of sticking through that. So you have that's probably your rotation now. Once you're healthy, once you get Joel Embiid back, that's what you're looking at right now. When the playoffs start, it's probably no Mike Scott, maybe. So that's kind of, so your 9 would probably be your starting 5 plus George Hill, Shake Milton, Matisse Thybulle, Dwight Howard. And that could be cut to 8 depending on matchups. Or if one guy's struggling or whatever. And that's what I love. It's just if Seth Curry's getting killed defensively, you don't have to close with Seth Curry. You can close with George Hill, or you can close with Matisse Thybulle. If Shake Milton has it going on a certain game and he's really scoring and he's really hot, you ride him to the end of the game. It's just I just love that the options. I love the chess game that Doc Rivers can play. And you can play it from series to series, from game to game. Because these things are going to progress. The Milwaukee Bucks are going to present a very different matchup from the Brooklyn Nets. So you're going to match up with them very differently. So it's good to have these bench pieces that you can do. And then when you talk about the buyout market, Daryl Morey seemed to strongly indicate that a big would kind of be on their radar, that would be kind of be the guy they would be looking at. I know Jason Blevins, who is a teammate of mine at 97.3, he wrote an article about 5 potential buyout guys. And if you're looking at centers, the guy I probably like the most is actually, and it's a name that a lot of people, I shouldn't say everyone, because some people are hoopers, I know that, and you guys are nerds like me and you're really following this stuff. But from the Memphis Grizzlies, Gorgui Dieng is a guy that I would be very interested in. Memphis likely buys him out just because they don't have minutes for him. He's 31 years old. They're looking to get young. They're going to play Brandon Clark. They're going to want to play Jaren Jackson when he's healthy. They're going to Xavier Tillman, who has been a very good draft pick for them. Like, they want to play those guys. They want to see what they can do. So there's just no minutes for Jiang. And quite frankly, if he comes here, there's no minutes for him, really. He's more of a third-string center, but he provides kind of what Dwight Howard can't, in that he's a little bit more mobile, and he can step out and hit a 3. Listen, Dwight Howard actually has hit a few threes, but Jiang, you see the stroke, it's a little bit more consistent, just adds a little bit more to the table offensively. So as a kind of insurance policy third-string center, he's a guy I'd really like. I don't think you can lure any of the bigger guys. Like, I don't think Aldridge is a guy that would want to come here, because I think he'll have opportunities to go somewhere else and have a definitive role, maybe even start somewhere. So I don't think he's an option. I love Otto Porter Jr. I would love him here. But same thing, there's no definitive role for him here when you look at what this team has. So I don't know that he would be a fit. So I would rule them out of the bigger names. A guy I would like, and I haven't heard him mention much, but it seems like the Rockets would probably buy him out, is Avery Bradley. Tough defender, shot the ball pretty well this year when he was healthy, when he was in the lineup. I wouldn't mind him having him as an insured. Look, when you go up against the Brooklyn Nets, you need all the perimeter defenders you can get. So to have a guy like him that you could use, you could go to if a guy gets hurt, God forbid, or a guy is struggling, I think Bradley can add a little something. Again, you're not asking him to play a huge role. You're almost signing him as kind of an insurance policy. But again, Daryl Morey seemed to indicate there's a big, but he also did say it would be a best player situation. So we'll see what happens. And then Jeff, your next question. Now that he's not traded, do you think Danny Green will be back next year? Very strong possibility. That could definitely happen. They're going to have his bird rights, I believe, so that makes him a little bit easier to re-sign in the offseason. He's been so good, and he's fit in so well on and off the court for this team. I'd be open to it. We'll see what happens, too. A lot can happen, obviously, between now and the end of the playoffs. We'll see where the Sixers wind up. If they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, if they make it to the NBA Finals, if they win a championship. If they win a championship, you think they'd be more inclined to want to run it back. Even if they just make it to the championship, probably feel inclined to run it back. But depending on what happens, depending on, what kind of the deficiencies are if they don't wind up winning a title. And then you'd also maybe use Danny Green in a sign and trade. That's another possibility as well. So there are options there with Danny Green. I think he's been really good. And I think last night, you saw two things. I think, one, you saw the burden of the trade deadline. You saw a guy play loose, which I think was big. And then I also think you saw a guy wanting, quite frankly, to stick it to his former team. And I don't blame him for that, especially kind of some of the stuff he went through last year with the Lakers and some of the weird stuff. I mean, if you look it up, his fiance was getting death threats. I mean, weird stuff, man, where people just got to take a step back and realize this is a sport. It's a game, and people just got to chill out a little bit. So I get it. We're all, everyone's passionate, everyone's a fan, but with some of that stuff that went on last year, I'm sure it felt pretty good for him to go back into that building and show out. And really, I mean, that's like flat out. Sixers don't win that game without him last night. So thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate you checking in, man. Thanks again for the question. From Mio, I think the George Hill acquisition will help Shake a ton. Milton better used as a scorer than a playmaker. I 100% agree. The book seemed to be on Shake Milton after last year when Brett Brown used him as a pure point guard. Pressure him up and down the floor, and I think it wears on him a little bit. I think it's worn on him a little bit. I think that's part of his issue. So I do agree. I think running him off screens a little bit as a catch-and-shoot guy might benefit him. More off-the-ball stuff where it's just less pressure on him to get them into the offense and get them into their sets and bring the ball up. Yeah, I think that would help him a ton. I am such a big, I want to see so much more of him and Ben Simmons in the pick and roll. We've seen little pieces of it the last couple of games, and I want more. I want to see more. Maybe you will if there are lineups where Ben Simmons is playing the 5, which is another thing maybe I would like to see more of. I think, to your point, Mayo, I agree. I think George Hill could be a big help for Shake Milton in that regard. So in that sense, not only you're getting a guy like Hill that can help you, but he's helping another guy play at a higher level. So we'll see what happens with Shake. As I mentioned off the top, a little disappointed with the way he shot the basketball because he has such a great record of being such a good shooter dating back to his SMU days and through the early part of his G League and NBA career. So I hope it's just a matter of time before he gets that sorted out because he's playing so well I think he's creating at a higher level than he ever has. You see that added muscle helping him around the rim and helping him on defense. So for the short term, is there any info regarding whether we pick up a center to fill the Bradley minutes? I think for now they're going to kind of ride this out until they get Joel Embiid back. I'm sure they would like to sign somebody. Jiang, again, is a guy I would like. Something tells me don't completely rule out Boogie Cousins. That's not a guy that I put high on my list. But, hey, again, as a third-string center, you could do a lot worse. Would he want to come here and play that role? I don't know. I don't know what his market looks like right now. He still can shoot the ball from the outside. He still can post up a little bit. He's a pretty good passer for a big man. But defensively, he's got no lateral movement whatsoever. He really struggles in that regard. So I don't know if that's the kind of guy you want to go after. But again, for a third-string center, you could do a hell of a lot worse. So maybe that's a guy they have interest in. I don't think, though, kind of just to around your question, I don't think they're in a hurry to fill it for that reason. I think they are weathering the storm. They've weathered it quite well so far. So I think they'll kind of continue to do that. Maybe you'll see more Paul Reed and just, they'll sign a guy when the time is appropriate and when it makes sense. Let's see what else we got here. Any update on Joel's status? So I believe today is when he is supposed to be reevaluated. I have not heard anything yet. Let me just double check my phone, guys. Let me make sure we're not hearing anything. And no, nothing as of yet on Joel Embiid. Hopefully we'll get more on him. They're not going to rush him back. I mean, look how well they're playing. There is no need to rush him back. Maybe when you get home from the road trip might be the best time to maybe ease him back in. But we'll see what happens. I would suspect he doesn't play tomorrow night in LA. He's obviously not with the team right now. I don't imagine they fly him out just to play him on Saturday. Looking ahead to the schedule, which I apologize, I should have just up and memorized, but I don't because I'm exhausted. It's been a long couple of days, guys. So please forgive me. So yeah, Tuesday in Denver, I can't imagine that is a game he plays either. We'll see. You never know. But that Thursday against Cavaliers, that could make some sense. Back at home, at that point we're pushing 3 weeks, so maybe that's a little bit closer of a timeline. But we'll see. Again, don't want to rush him back. Let him heal up. Let him get 100%, and we'll figure this thing out. Let's see what else we have here. What would be considered a failed successful season for the Sixers? Well, I mean, quite frankly, if they don't win a championship, to a degree, that's a failure. As they say, there are 29 other teams that go home unhappy every year. So there can only be one champion. So it would be, I guess it's more of a level of disappointment, right? And I also think, again, context matters. Nothing happens in a vacuum. It's going to matter how it happens. So if they, if they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals but lose to the Nets, but they play the Nets tough, and it's a 7-game series, you're disappointed that it ended that way. But at the same time, when you look at the season in its kind of totality, then that's a pretty successful season in my book, considering where the season started and where kind of the offseason and everything that's happened. If they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and play a loaded Nets team and give them a tough series, that's a pretty good season. If they're bounced in the second round, that to me is a pretty big disappointment. I'll lay that bare. I think that's a pretty big disappointment if they don't make it to the Eastern Conference Final this year. But yeah, I think anything beyond that is got to be seen as a positive moving forward. They want to win a championship. They've all been very clear about that. That's the goal, and that's what they want to do. Do they have enough? I don't know. The Nets matchup will be very intriguing. Let's hope they get to that point, and then we can talk more about that a little later on, hopefully. Does any team have more offensive fouls than the Sixers? Seems like Simmons and Howard each get, Dwight Howard that was brutal last night, and Dwight Howard is just a foul machine, man. And I love Dwight. And he's added a lot this year to them. He's played really well, especially since the All-Star break. I think maybe last night, he was a little fired up, playing, getting his ring, playing against his former team, playing against the guy in Harrell who basically replaced him, essentially. So I think he was maybe a little too fired up. He does pick up his fair share of screens that are deemed illegally. Ben Simmons, but listen, Ben Simmons, I'm good with him committing offensive fouls because when he's committing offensive fouls, that signals to me that he's being aggressive. So I live with that. You don't want a lot of them. I mean, you want him to stay out of foul trouble because you need him on the defensive end because he's such a big part of what you do there. But I don't mind it as much because, I love the aggressiveness. I hate that he missed so many free throws last night, but I love that he got to the line last night and then created a ton for others. It was one of those games where stat sheet, it looks not great, but I thought he was very good. I don't love the missed free throws. I don't love the turnovers, but other than that, I thought he really affected the game in a big way last night, and kind of, especially in that third quarter when they went on that big run, he kind of took over the game a little bit. So, yeah, to get back to your question, I can, as far as where they are as with the rest of the league, I don't know. I don't know where they are, but I would say Dwight Howard, you just kind of have to live with that. With Ben Simmons, I'm good living with it because of what it kind of signifies. Which Joel out fan base was excited about the shooting stats Ben will put up. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to be disappointed because they played so well. You know what I mean? This is the best outside of when Ben Simmons, his rookie year, when they had that 17-game winning streak and they won a bunch without Joel Embiid. this stretch rivals that for how well they played without him, and it's a similar formula where it's surround Ben Simmons with shooters and play fast as hell. And I think that's the way you have to play with Joel Embiid out. I think that's the best method. Listen, I just talked about how good Dwight Howard's been, but at the same time, I sort of wonder if in the playoffs when Joel Embiid doesn't play, if the lineup that's smaller and runs and shoots to surround Ben, I wonder if that might not be better. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I hope that Doc won't be rigid with it. I hope that if there are lineups where, and let's lay that there too. It's problematic when you have Ben Simmons and Dwight Howard in the game, and teams that are smart defensively and really play the paint well, like the Milwaukee Bucks. They're just going to wall everything up, and you're going to have a really hard time scoring. So against teams like that, I would hope that Doc Rivers wouldn't be so rigid, and he will. I don't know whether it's putting Ben at the 5 and surrounding him with shooters or whatever the lineup looks like. Just playing a different brand of basketball, I think, could be good against a team like Milwaukee. But then a team like the Nets and a guy like Nick Claxton or whoever is their backup. I don't know who the hell is going to be their backup. Maybe it's Drummond. I don't know. Whatever it is. Maybe Dwight Howard is a fine matchup, and you can play that way, and you're okay. So we'll see. A lot of moving parts. But again, that George Hill move just really lengthens what they can do. So I think that's a positive. Kira, I love you, kiddo. I miss you. That's my niece, guys. She's awesome. And, yeah. But, yeah, I think I'm going to wrap this thing up, guys, because we are approaching about a half hour. And I got to be honest with you, I'm just tired of talking. I'm tired in general. It's been a long couple of days, man. I got like 4 hours of sleep the other night, I think at most, the night of before the deadline, and nothing happened because the Raptors held the NBA trade deadline hostage with the Lowry stuff, and then they don't even move them. So cool stuff. Thanks. And then just last night was just a long night with the late game again, and I have a wonderful girlfriend who was kind enough to bring me some Chick-fil-A breakfast, which was just lovely this morning. It was a very nice thing to wake up to. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for following along. Thank you so much for coming in on the live stream again. I want to do more of these because I'm really enjoying it, and I really enjoy when you guys have these questions to fire. I know this one was a little bit last minute, but I didn't want to do nothing the day after the trade deadline. So that's this. I'm hoping to have a fuller episode of Coming In for a Landing with a guest either this weekend, maybe during Steve-O, really? Chick-fil-A has breakfast? Are you kidding me? You got to wake up before noon, bro. No, I'm just messing with you. Yes, Chick-fil-A has breakfast, and it is delicious. They have chicken biscuits, and they are quite good. It's good. Chicken biscuit, hash brown, and they had iced coffee, which Carrie got me, and it was quite good, man. She was up and at 'em at like 8 a.m. today. I was out still when she left, and she came back with it, and I was very grateful for that. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you again. Again, want to do this more. Going to have more Coming In for Landing. Check out my article again on Daryl Morey and kind of his thoughts and what my thoughts on this team now going forward. You can check it out on 973ESPN.com. Follow me on Twitter at Paul Hudrick. Also follow Coming In for a Landing on all social media. I'm out there, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I appreciate you guys so much again for checking it out, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much.